Pues buenos días a todos, gracias por venir a este último evento antes de agosto, ¿no? Y las vacaciones. Muchas gracias por estar aquí y espero que responda a vuestros intereses, ¿no? Vamos a hacer en inglés el acto, por tanto vamos a cambiar a hablar en inglés. I'm going to switch to English. Now this is the thing we normally do with the presentation of the report of International Energy Agency. Today we are going to present the investment report. This is investment report. This is the first time you can download it for free. No other time you have to pay. This is the second time in a row we are presenting here with Alessandro this report. I hope you will see very interesting for you things, because they are explaining several changes we have seen in the last year, no? In the last year, in this landscape about investment in all the energy sector. This is something we can appreciate in this investment. You will have the presentation in our web. After this, you will download for free, you want, from the AIE web. Okay, I'm trying to introduce my colleagues here. Alessandro Blasi, he came here last year. He joined, he's Italian, he joined his senior program officer. He joined in 2009, the AIE here. He is also responsible for the AIE Energy Business Council, chaired by the executive president or the director of Fatih Bureau. Before joining AIE, he worked for ENERGIA, and he's a specialized guy in all these things. And we have together this year Alberto Toril. He's a secondant from Iberdrola there in the agency. He joined the agency this year, no? Yeah, at the beginning of January. He has participated in this report with Alessandro. The presentation will be, you will start, Alessandro. After this, you are managing the presentation, and after this we can have this Q&A session normally in this kind of thing. Alessandro, the floor is yours. Will you try to with this?
Yes. So, first of all, thank you very much for the introduction and for hosting us. This year we decided to do this earlier because we were so pleased of last year that it was in September, the presentation of the investment report. So we actually asked if it was possible to do earlier, and we released the report on Tuesday. So it's basically one of the first presentations we've done. Now it's our pleasure, really our pleasure. And it's a pleasure to come back to Spain for personal reason. As an Italian, love this country, but also professional reason. We, as the AIE, we are very much in debt to support we get from ENER Club, but also from mainly from Iberdrola. Alberto is here, Carlos is here, as well as from other key important companies and institutions in Spain. So we restructured the presentation. I will do the first part. Alberto will join us and is a key pillar of our team in the AIE. Will share the key finding of the power sector, and then I will make a conclusion with focus on some specific area we have done. It's important for me to start to say this report is something that is developed by, I would say, small but truly dedicated team in the AIE, but also benefit of the wise guidance of our executive director, as well as inputs and know-how from many experts within the International Energy Agency, as well as from experts all around the world. So it's a truly collective efforts. As been mentioned, we decided to make the report for free since this year in order to try to make all the findings available to everyone that will be interested. So moving on the substance, the first message is, in the last 2 years edition of the report, we emphasized that the investment in the global energy sector had declined. and this is the case also for 2017 as well. So for the third year in a row, we saw the investment in the total global energy sector plunging modestly, 2%, but still the direction remained consistent. The total amount of investment is about 1.8 trillion, considering all the different sectors of supply, technology, efficiency, and so on. So this is the first message. The second message is, last year, for the first time, as far as we know, we saw electricity overtaking the oil and gas supply as the main recipient of energy investment. And this year, this trend is confirmed, having investment going into power sector being larger than oil and gas. This, of course, is something important to underline because this underpins the trend towards a greater electrification of our economies, which is something we believe is going to stay and expand further in the future. But actually, if we look in details, the investment in the electricity sector declined by 5%. And this is very much something dictated by declining in generation, because not only a strong decline in thermal conventional electricity generation, but also we had a 7% decline in investment in renewables worldwide, which is raising some concern for us, and we will enter into discussion later on details of this. The oil and gas sector, including upstream, downstream, and midstream, rebounded very modestly, 2%. But nevertheless remained lower than electricity. The thing is, the ranking number one of the power towards oil and gas is on a fragile territory, so according how the policies will evolve this year, we are not sure that 2018 will continue to see electricity number one, but the direction in the long term is set. A good news is about energy efficiency that remained the fastest growing sector in terms of energy investment. Also, with only 3% increase, the pace of growth slowed down compared to previous year, and we are seeing some slowdown and improvement in global in energy intensity of the global economy, which of course is something we do not welcome at all. And then we had two other sectors which has much less importance in terms of energy investment, but I will say much bigger importance in terms of energy system, which continue to decline significantly. Coal supply, minus 13%, which could be a good news for climate change and sustainability purposes. But something which is a warning for us is that the investment in renewables outside the power sector, so in transport, it remains negligible. So the AIE has been advocating since many years that if we want to put us in a sustainable trajectory, the success that we have seen in renewables in power sector needs to move outside power and to go in heating and to go in transport. But actually, this is proceeding in a very negative way, I would say. The overall picture, the last metric I would say as a starting point is, when we look at the total investment, we have seen basically until 2015 that the share of fossil fuel investment in the total was more or less flat at around 70%. In the last 2 years, we have seen, in the previous last 2 years, we have seen a steep decline in investment in fossil fuel, so this share went from 70 to around 58%, and we welcome this as a sign of a change, but last year actually there was an uptick on the investment in fossil fuel as a share of the global. Now, another important message, this year the chapter has the book is structured around 3 big chapters, and one of those is dedicated entirely to financing of the energy sector. And one important thing that we have noted looking at all details of this sector is about the role of state-backed enterprises in steering the global energy system. Over the last 5 years, the investment done directly by government throughout state-owned enterprises or national oil companies has been increasing from 39% to 42%. And this is a trend that we are seeing basically throughout all sectors. The key ones leading this overall result are upstream oil and gas, so national oil companies, or thermal power generation, coal gas, where we have a predominance of state-owned enterprises, especially for instance like China. But at the same time we are seeing this trend consolidating despite last year, in 2017, we had a big drop in investment in coal-fired power plants in China. So this is a trend that seems to be set up about the importance of government. Even more importantly is that if we look not at the investment done directly by government, but investment done by private companies or entities which are underpinned by government policies, renewables is a clear example, in energy efficiency is another, but in many parts, the role of government in steering the global energy system we quantified to be around 3/4 of the total of the investment. And this for us is a clear striking messages about the importance of good policies in order to determine the global energy investment. Now, we move into a more specific areas. I will start from what used to be the main recipient of the investment, which is the oil and gas sector, and which is not anymore, I mean, at least for the time being. And one important thing has been, one important question that we did to ourselves has been, after the big drop we had in upstream investment following the collapse of oil prices, what is happening? Because we had more than 45% of decline in investment, $350 billion lost since 2004, in the period 2014-2016. But since 2016, the oil prices have more than doubled. So, as upstream investment follows the oil prices? And the answer is no. We had a 4% increase is in nominal terms here in 2017, and we had a similar increase of investment expected for this year based on our bottom-up approach of the analysis of capital spending of more than 100 companies all around the world. So we are still in 2018 about 40% lower than the peak reached in 2018, reached in 2014. This is companies are doing much more with less. There is more cost discipline, more attention to financial balance, and so on. Another important message is, if you look at the money spent, is an important indicator, but is not telling you the entire picture. And the other important metric to be kept in mind is cost. Now, in the upstream industry, roughly, there's been always a very linear relationship between oil prices and the cost of upstream. If price collapsed, so did the upstream cost. If prices spike up, so does the cost. But since 2016, we have seen this relationship getting broken. We had the double of oil prices, and the cost in the upstream industry has basically remaining flat, and for 2018 we are seeing only a 3% increase. companies are doing more with less. They have changed their way to design, execute, and manage projects. They are paying much more attention to not allocate larger amount of capital upfront. So, in the previous edition of the report, we have tried to answer the question, which is extremely difficult to answer, to what extent the cost deflation we have seen is structural, and to what extent is cyclical. And we believe a significant component of the savings achieved are structural and set to stay. But at the same time, we recognize that who took the burden of the cost deflation has been the service industry, which has been squeezed in the pricing, in the request from industry. So ultimately there is a limit for the upstream cost in service industry to give further concession, and the future supply cost curve will be determined largely by any further efficiencies the company's operators can implement on one side, and on the other side by likely inflationary pressures. So this is the first message. The second message is the industry is changing also in terms of investment by assets. This is a sector that has been traditionally dominated over 90-95% of the investment in conventional assets, onshore or offshore, which has a quite predictable production profiles. But the shale revolution happening in the United States has been changing this picture. So we are seeing the shale attracting from less than 5% in the previous decade to almost 25% in 2018. And keep in mind that shale oil and gas production globally accounts for 8% of the global oil and gas supply. On the conventional side, offshore sector has been the one hit mostly because it's the one that requires the largest upfront amount of capital and has long lead times to pay back. Even if in the second half of 2017 and in this first month we are seeing clear signs that deep water is coming back because the companies have halved the cost. It's unbelievable what has been achieved there. You have a project sanctioned in the North Sea with a break-even of $20 per barrel. You have projects like Shell Vito in the Gulf of Mexico, but also Mad Dog from BP, Guyana, and so on, that are sanctioned at $35 break-even, deep water. So it's coming back. On the onshore side, we have seen a resilience of investment, but this masks an important change. The investment on the onshore has moved from new capacity to brownfields, expansion of already existing production facilities. And this is going to be worrying because every year we have to replace 3 million barrels per day of oil that we lose for the natural decline of fields, without considering the very robust oil demand growth we are having in the markets. So the overall picture is that we believe the oil markets are becoming to be slightly more complicated compared to the past because we move from a situation where the sector was dominated by homogeneous production profile, the conventional, working on long lead times, toward the situation where the balancing is the combination of conventional assets and the shale, which works in a completely different time horizon, because 80-85% of production of shale is produced in the first 2 years. So the combination of these two elements, in our view, suggest the probability of more volatility in the market ahead of the market. And I'm underlining volatility, not necessarily higher prices, volatility in the market. The third and last message on upstream is about the star of the upstream sector, which is the United States shale. Last year, investment in shale, despite upstream was depressed, increased by 60%, in 2017, 60. This year, we expect 20% increase in upstream, in shale, which is by far the fast-growing region. Now, what we are trying to do is, we try to answer a question from our executive director, which has been, to what extent the second leg of growth that we are seeing coming to the market from US is different from the previous one. So we have looked in details at this sector, and we've started to try to address this question, making another question, which was largely debated in the market, and it was, could the United States shale industry be considered a sort of financial bubble that has developed on the basis of a lot of cheap money available and quantitative easing policies? Well, we believe these elements has been important elements to underpin the U.S. shale industry, but there's been many other elements, and the United States shale has developed since its starting phase. So we identified 4 different areas. Number one, 2010-2014, we call the startup phase. Cheap money, technology development, high oil prices made the investment increase 4 times, generating an increase of production of 8 times. This is the fastest growth in the entire oil history after the development of supergiants field in Saudi Arabia in the 1960s. But this came a price of more than 200 billion of cumulative negative free cash flow. So in other terms, in this period, the company spent up to $1.8 for each dollars of revenue generated, being forced to rely extensively on external source of finance, debt, asset sale, or dilution of ownership through equity raising. The collapse of oil prices 2015 and 16 paradoxically generated an improvement of financial condition of companies, but this is an artificial improvement because it was given by a 70% collapse of investment, also sustained by halving of cost in the service industry over these 2 years. Companies continue to overspend, but at the same time, this period forced companies to make enormous technology operational improvement. So despite a 70% collapse of investment, as you can see in the chart, the production didn't decline significantly. 2017 is a turning point. 60% increase in investment, much more confidence, also thanks to rising oil prices, but also thanks to the entrance of the big oil giants in the United States, shale sector, Exxon, Conoco, Chevron, but also BP, Shell, that bet very strongly in this sector. And now, for 2018, we see for the first time ever the United Shale industry being on track to achieve positive free cash flow. With 20% increase of investment, we are seeing a production increasing of 1.3 million barrels per day, which is the fastest annual increase of the light tight oil ever. At the same time, we emphasize 4 downside risks for the industry. Number one, there are inflationary pressures, signs in certain business, overheating, especially in Permian. Unemployment rate is below 2% in Texas. So we have problem to our truck drivers, hospital to find an apartment, all these kind of things. So companies need to offset this inflationary pressure. Number two, pipeline bottlenecks that create discounted prices between the source of production and the hubs. And the evacuation pipeline needed to be scaled up in order to accommodate the rising production. Number three, as an opportunity, digitalization. Everyone thinks of digitalization in power and demand-side management. Digitalization can be a game changer in the upstream, especially in shale. To data analytics, management of hundreds of fields simultaneously, better spacing between wells, better understanding of reservoir, and so on. And number 4, the improvement the United Shale has been doing over the last years are not insulated by the rest of the world. We have seen exceptional improvement in other areas, so the United States shale industry needs to remain competitive against other source of supply. With this, we move to power, and I pass to Alberto.
Here, it's fine. Okay. Yes, hello. Hi, thank you very much, Alessandro. So, my name is Alberto Toril, and I will be speaking about the power sector in the 4 next slides. So, to start with it, we would like to link this slide with the other side of the coin. We were mentioning in what Alessandro was mentioning at the beginning of the presentation, and is the increasing role of state-backed companies and SOEs in the role of power investment. So what we try to analyze here, it's we try to analyze the main drivers of investment, so how this investment make money, and we found that over 95% of the power system investment, the power energy system investment, it's done under some sort of regulated or long-term contracted activities. This is especially true when we are talking about the networks, since regulated rate of returns help to mitigate risk and as well to assure cost recovery for utilities. But it's also especially true when talking about generation, both in thermal and in renewable, where some assets performing under long-term contracts assure debt financing, and at the same time renewables are deeply deployed under feed-in tariffs and some sort of long-term PPAs, power purchase agreements. Well, we still see wholesale competitive markets playing an important role in order to provide flexibility and competitiveness to the energy market, but we don't see the price signals enough to increase the investment in these sort of scenarios. Now, this story in the role of policies, makes a direct implication for the type of power sector investment to be made. So, as we were pointing before, the power sector investment fell by 6% in 2017, reaching a level of $750 billion. So, in this decreasing trend, we see 2 interesting implications. So, the first one, it's in the relationship in between the global power sector investment with the demand. We see the power sector becoming more capital intensive. So what we did is we analyzed the last decade, and in the first half of the last decade we saw the power sector investment increasing at a very good clip, at the same time that the demand was growing, but during the second half of the decade we saw the power sector investment growing at a slower pace. Even though the ratio of the power sector investment and demand growth has more than doubled. And this is thanks to policies encouraging the deployment of renewables, as well to efforts in extending and upgrading the electrical grids, and in some extent to provide and to enable flexible assets in the grid, such as battery storage, which help to deploy variable renewable. At the same time, the increase of energy efficiency has been dampening demand growth. Meanwhile, less capital intensive thermal generation, it's decreasing over time. So the second message we find very important here is that even though we see that the composition of the energy sector investment has shifted towards more capital intensive, cleaner sources, we are not seeing the expected generation from these sources growing in a way to meet deep decarbonization of the power system. In fact, renewable generation, as Alessandro was pointing before, decreased in 2017 by 6%. In the meantime, nuclear power investment decreased by 45%. Nevertheless, there are some places in the power sector investment in the generation side that has decreased over time. This is the case for both wind and solar PV, which were increasing from the last 5 years at a very good clip. Even though wind decreased in 2017, In the meantime, solar PV reached record levels last year in both terms of investment and capacity additions, but this increase has been more than offset by the decrease in other cleaner sources such as nuclear, we were mentioning before, and hydro. So the overall decrease in 2017 from previous year was a total of 10% down. So if we put this into comparison with the demand growth, we saw an increase in 2017. So the implication of this, we are seeing an emerging gap to meet demand growth with low carbon power investments. The implication of this is like to reach or to follow clean energy transition goals and to reach deep decarbonization of the power system, the expected generation from these sources should at least meeting demand growth, and this is not happening. So in the future, in the years ahead, investment in clean energy sources has to rise, or demand has to moderate. In the meantime, and this is something that we study in the chapter 2 of the book, policies recently rise in China in relationship with the deployment of PV are raising the risk of a lower investment in power energy sector this year. Two more slides on the power sector. In this one, we appointed actually, which is one of the leading factors of the growing role of renewables in the market. And we saw during 2017 that over 50% of the projects of investment made in the renewable sector outside China has been led by some sort of long-term contract under competitive mechanisms such as auctions. And our analysis here focused on how the market is responding, and we had numerous stakeholders in the industry appointing us economies of scale, such as one of the success factors for auctions. So one of the key findings that we found in emerging market is like the projects actually are getting bigger thanks to auctions. At the same time, the prices of auctions are going down dramatically. There are many factors of this. One of them, for example, is technology development, which is actually aiming to cost reductions on technology. But at the same time, developers being able to extract economies of scale from contracting or from procurement of material and better financing are benefit from economies of scale. Nevertheless, this is something that we are not seeing everywhere where we have auctions, since, for example, in Europe, onshore projects, onshore renewable projects face more challenges against land constraints and local acceptance. And in some cases, even the design of auctions are benefit of smaller community projects, for example, as we have in Germany. Where we did see actually an increase on project sizes, it's in offshore wind, where offshore, of course, we don't have land constraints, but the major drop in prices here we saw thanks to the use of bigger turbines in the projects and better financing from developers. And it is something that we explain further in the book. The last thing that I will touch upon before turning back to my colleague Alessandro is what's going on with FIDs, final investment decisions. And this is in plans to be built in the future in large scale dispatchable generation. This is something we appoint very important because in the end is the way, or is the source that provides flexibility to the system. This is sort of the traditional mechanism that the electrical system has relied upon until now. So for FIDs in coal power plants, I mean, we saw a decrease in 2016 and 2017, reaching a level of 32 gigawatts installed, and actually staying at a level of 1/3 compared to 2010. This drop has been driven by the dramatic decrease in China, but also in India and other countries of Southeast Asia. As well, we saw turning or a shifting to more efficient plants, with subcritical coal plants outpacing at the 15% of the total capacity installed in 2017. It's more difficult to finance and to get recovery rates from coal power plants, in part thanks to policies backing up renewables and local pollution concerns in some cases, but at the same time it's more difficult to extract revenues from the solely sale of energy from the coal plants. Nevertheless, the coal fleet keeps expanding in these economies, but at a slower pace. what we found as well in the gas-fired generation, it's a stronger trend than in the coal power plant, but we also see decrease. And this decrease here is led by the reduction of investment by the United States and MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, where even though counting with cheap gas, domestic gas, and a better and a good pipeline infrastructure, I mean, this is going down. This is as well outpacing an increase on production in China and in Europe after reaching as lower levels in 2017. With that, I will wrap it up and I will turn the mic to my colleague Alessandro.
Thank you.
Alessandro.
This one?
This one, it's okay.
Just I'm left-handed, so I'm trying to go to. So thank you very much, Alberto. And now, so far we have looked basically at the first two chapters of the report. The first chapter is about energy investment trend by different sectors. The chapter 2 is about source of financing, what are the key actors, how the money flows, the business model, and so on. Then we have a third chapter where we try to explore different areas in energy technology or particular area which we believe are important for the global energy system. I will try to give a quick overview on this, but of course many more in the book. And the one area that we believe is particularly important and we are tracking as energy investment team to look at is about the spending in research, development and deployment in the energy sector. These are numbers that are not included in the 1.8 trillion figures that I measured at the beginning, but nevertheless are essential money spent to steer the trend of the future global energy system. And now, as you can see from the picture, this is the government budget in research and development. The picture is particularly depressing, both in terms of the trend as well as in terms of the amount of money spent, because with around 20 billion or something more, the amount of money spent in R&D in the energy sector is a very small fraction of the government budget. But if we want to turn this in more positive terms, is that finally the last year, in 2017, we saw an uptick of 13% uptick in the spending in the R&D from government. Is differently from what could be the perception of reading media and so on. This increase of spending is mainly thanks to United States and is mainly thanks to investment in new clean energy technologies like electric vehicles, distribution charges and so on. Nevertheless, as I mentioned before, this remains a worrying trend. We have also separately done an exercise which is even more complicated than this, which is trying to assess the R&D budget from private companies, which is much larger than the government. We estimate a total of around 88 billion spent by companies worldwide in R&D over the last year. Here,
1 year.
in 1 year. The largest spending are oil and gas companies, automotive companies that especially with the rush towards electric vehicles or new source of mobility have accelerated spending. However, what we believe is important to emphasize and also keeping in mind another report we have released a few months ago in May, which is a tracking clean energy progress report, where we try to assess how the new technologies and clean technologies are evolving. And unfortunately, out of the 38 technologies, new clean technologies, that we track, only 4 are considered to be fully on track for a better and sustainable future. Now, a second element before going to conclusion is just to give a flavor that many of the changes we are seeing in the global energy system also moves, if I may say, outside the core business of the energy companies. So there is a growing involvement of actors which do not belong properly to the traditional energy sector, starting to take a stake into the energy system. So to do this, we have looked at how the investment have evolved, and we are speaking of strategic investment in energy technology startup. And what we find out is even if the overall amount of money is small compared to the global energy investment, is that we have a strong uptick over the last couple of years in acquisition or takeover of energy startup, especially again distributed generation, electric vehicles, all this kind of mobility area. And the most interesting finding for us, which surprised us, is that this is a trend driven by ICT companies. It's not a trend driven by the traditional actors of the global energy system. And again, has not yet a scale to determine a reshuffle of the sector, but there are signs that you have a changing competitive landscape, and is an area which we aim to monitor more in the future. So these are just a few findings, if I may say, of the report. There is more in the book on LNG, on downstream, on petrochemicals, more on power, more on source of financing. We have an in-depth about carbon capture and storage, which we believe is one of the technology crucial to steer us towards a more sustainable future. But to try to summarize the key messages is, first of all, the role of government is undisputed. Directly throughout the money that governments put in making investment happening, but also in steering the private investment. So the policies the government do are crucial to make the investment happening. And this is across all the sector. Is power generation, is power grids, where almost entire investment are under regulated mechanism. It's also oil and gas upstream, where policies and fiscal policies of countries matter in boosting or in depressing investment by companies. The second message is, although is on fragile legs, the trend towards electricity becoming the largest recipient of energy investment is there. And we believe electrification is going to be a trend that will not be reversed. This year, the AIE declared 2018 as a year of electricity, and we are going to have a major study about the future of electricity released later this year within the World Energy Outlook, which, as far as I know, you will host in November, just after the release, which is 13 November. The oil and gas industry is changing. Last year, I said here, pay attention that everyone looks at other sector as the most innovative, as the most fashionable in terms of evolution, like outside of the oil and gas. Well, oil and gas is the dinosaur, the traditional, well, I'm sorry, is not. Has been changing very rapidly, adapting to new condition. But what we are seeing now is there is a trend of shifting of companies towards shorter cycle projects, which could also mean that the companies are trying to generate profit and revenue, which is understandable, it's their business to return value to shareholders, while taking a shorter exposure to long-term risk, which could be read also as a sign that these companies as well are seeing a transition coming or behind under the corner. But the changing factors of the way the oil and gas industry is working with the shale on one side, the convention on the other side, the short cycle projects, faster declining production exit might be a factor to increasing volatility in the market. Second time, not necessarily higher prices, which is something AIE does not forecast by law. The government budget in research and development has been rising, but remain insufficient if we compare the share of government budget in this R&D in energy vis-a-vis other sectors, pharmaceutical, or this kind of things. We are very far. The relationship is 0.1% in the energy sector, 10% in pharmaceutical. So there is, of course, a big scope to increase the government R&D, and at the same time, there is scope to accelerate private investment in technologies, developmental, of course, renewable, increase energy efficiency, as well as carbon capture utilization storage, which we think is a sort of blind spot of the debate of the last few years. And last but not least, even if I would prefer to finish with a more positive note, if we take all this element together, we see some element of concern. Let's say, on energy security side, which is at the core of AIE mandate, we see the investment being depressed on the backbone of the energy system. We see investment depressed in upstream. We see investment depressed in dispatchable power. And this, of course, raises a certain amount of concern about the stability of the energy system in the future. At the same time, for the new energy system that we aim for, we hope for, towards a clean energy transition, we do not see the speed of acceleration in investment that will be required. Just one element, when we compare the share of investment in fossil fuel today at 59%, in our sustainable development scenario, the share of investment in fossil fuel should be 40%. So we remain very far, and this is just one metric out of the many that we could use. We remain very far. So the system is in transition, but is not a transition that is going fast enough in the new area, while is already a bit depressed in the traditional area. And of course this is something that enhances the importance of policies shaped in a proper way, given the importance of government in steering the global energy system. With this, we thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Alessandro and Alberto. It's an outstanding presentation. We are in transition, I understood, no? From your presentation, the whole system is going down, and a little bit depressed, as you said, and the new one is not enough encouraged. No? I think this is the time for questions for you, for all the floor. You can make this question in Spanish or in English, no? Whatever you want.
Spanish, someone has to translate.
Well, but Alberto could understand in Spanish too. He could answer this. This is something interesting about your comments in EMP. No, they saw the level of the EMP investment, and these prices you told us about deep water, no? $35. This is a new. This is something like the down. Like in renewables, no? You can see this going down, all of these prices. No, this is something like this in this area.
It's pretty impressive. This is the reason now. The investment, when I show the investment and the offshore going down is something that which is also very much related to the fact that we see the share of investment in offshore going down because the amount of investment that are entering now, looking at the profile of investment, is not sufficient to offset the decline of investment of projects that were sanctioned a few years ago, and they have now reached completion. But when you look at the conventional resources sanctioned, in 2017, and this very much is the last part of 2017, the amount of conventional resource sanctioned in deep water is at a pre-crisis level. Deep water has come back very strong, and we will see the spending materializing in the next years, because the production profile of this project is not just at the beginning, so is over the next years. But and for me the message is, okay, United States shale is the star of the upstream sector, but pay attention, deep water is coming back, and we have a bunch of companies that have bet a lot on this. However, if you look at the overall spending, for instance, of the majors, offshore remain a critical component, because this is where they can implement their technology or financial, or where they can have easier access to reserves. So it's a critical component. But it's interesting to see the amount of investment that the majors are allocating to short cycle projects in shale. It went from 6% in 2016 to 18% this year. So triple in 2 years. And again, I believe, you look at Chevron capital spending, 75% of capex of 2018 to generate cash flow in 2 years. For an industry that was used to think in 10, 15, 20 years of time, is a revolution.
Yeah, I know.
But it's important to keep another element to put on sustainability. If you take the overall conventional resources sanctioned, we are now at around 9 billion barrels of oil, 18 oil equivalent, so oil and gas together, 50-50. This amount of resources is consistent with the sustainable development scenario.
Yeah.
But the demand is even above the new policy scenario. So this is the reason why there is a gap that needs to be filled in with more investment or more shale production, which is already going, or less demand, which demand remains very strong.
Okay. Some question for somebody from there, down here. You can present yourself, introduce yourself, and ask the question to them. Here you are.
Thank you very much, Alessandro and Alberto, for your presentation. It's very clear.
I think it doesn't work.
We can hear.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have two questions.
Okay.
The first question, it surprised me when you talk about renewable transport and heat. It reduced by 13%. The first question is, when you talk about renewable transport and heat, it's decreasing by 13% last year, no? And it's very much. Do you have any answer for this?
Why decreasing?
Any comment? Why decreases
Yeah.
and why is decreasing? And the second question is, what about the offshore wind investment in the world?
Renewables and transport. This is very much biofuels. And the biofuels. And the biofuels is not going well at all. Just to give an example, in 2008-2009, the level of investment in biofuels was in the order of $20 billion per year. Last year was about $1 billion. So this is, of course, there are many reasons related to this. There is a lot of attention related to the competition for food in agriculture and so on. But this remains a very depressed, and of course very much relies on government incentives. For instance, the blending mandate in the United States for ethanol, which is again very much attached to agricultural policy of the country, as well as, for instance, in Brazil. So this is the reason why, renewables in transport, because we cannot consider investment in electric vehicles like renewables in transport, because of course it depends how electricity is generated. For the heat, the other problem is we would need much more electrification of the heat system, for instance with the deployment of stronger number of heat pumps, which is something extremely efficient for the industrial sector and the motor sector, and there's a lot of potential. What we estimate is that one of the key, if not the largest, source for increasing efficiency is, for instance, industrial motors, which is something is not debated at all. There are many interesting aspects that are keeping out of the debate. One is the trucks, that everyone speaks about electric cars, but the key source of all demand growth in the transport is trucks. So everyone speaks of efficiency for cars, but it's trucks, the area that should be targeted. Everyone speaks of all demand for in the transport sector as a key source of growth, but overall is petrochemicals, is aviation and shipping. The heat pumps is another one that is completely out of the debate. So there you have different things. Offshore wind, before passing to Alberto, I think offshore wind is still a peculiar case in the sense that we are seeing offshore wind going very, very well in North Sea. I think last year could have been 4 gigawatt of investment or something like this. And you had incredible progress in terms of technology development. We also estimate that if there was an important component in reducing cost in improving financing conditions for this, also because it's underpinned by some government policies, Germany, Holland, related to the networks and the connection to the grid. At the same time, if you want to move outside Europe, I think you have to keep in mind if offshore wind is the best investment case within renewables. For instance, if you go in the east coast or west coast of United States, maybe is better before or is cheaper before exploit a lot of onshore wind potential that is still there before moving into the offshore. And just
well, majority of questions, are addressed already by you, but we saw actually record levels of offshore wind as well, reaching, as Alessandro was mentioning, 4 gigawatts installed last year. The drop actually in the wind sources come from offshore. Offshore was a 50% decrease, majority due to United States, China, Europe, and Brazil. There was a decline. But the case from offshore wind was in a very good track, as we were mentioning.
Any more questions? Another one on the back. I have another question for you at the end.
Thank you very much. Alfonso González. You mentioned, or you were talking about investment in the energy sector, and could you globally tell us which is the percentage done by the public sector and done by the private sector? And in public sector, I include also guarantees, loans by the public sector, etc. Which is the balance, please?
the balance is, the slide we showed before is, we go from, in 2012, 39% public. So we consider this, we call this state-backed, because there's different ways. So state-owned enterprise or national oil companies, to give an example. So we go from 39% in 2012 to 42% in 2017. So this is, I would say, the amount of money that are invested almost directly throughout governments in different ways, in a different investment channel, which could be the companies I mentioned, or sovereign wealth funds and so on. what we do is, the thing that to what extent loans and other things are included is about how you dissect the balance sheet of companies, for instance. Because when you look at the ways investment are done between different sectors, of course you have a different approach. First of all, 93% of the 1.8 trillion, which is the total investment, is on balance sheet. And only 7% is like project finance, which is very much a case of, is higher, of course, is important in renewables, project finance. To speak of new sector, and to speak of conservative sector is LNG. In LNG liquefaction plant, you have almost 3/4 of investment are done on project finance. So this is the way we look at the things, about what is project finance, what is balance sheet, as well as what is the role of government in terms of state-backed enterprise and how much is in the private, through again private sheet, balance sheet.
Okay, some more question, any question for this? Okay, here we have another one. I've seen this.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Gabriel Martinez, and I have a question regarding one of the first slides you presented. It's about investment. You mentioned investment in production. Yeah, this one.
This one.
Electricity generation and supply, oil and gas supply, and energy efficiency. When you talk about energy efficiency, could you please give more detail about that?
We always have this question, in the sense that energy efficiency is a very, very difficult exercise, in the sense that there is no universal recognized methodology to measure energy efficiency. So another way what we have looked at is substantially three main areas on energy efficiency, which is industry, buildings, and transport. And what we have looked at is the incremental, we consider as energy efficiency, the incremental spending that consumers, company, public entities do compared to the average standards. In other words, we allocate to energy efficiency for a car the incremental spending to buy a model of the car which is more efficient than the average in the market. Or we do the incremental spending in buildings for lighting, for air conditioning, and so on, compared has the incremental spending that you do to buy a more efficient equipment compared to the minimum performance standard in the market. Say this, I mean, we recognize is not a perfect way to measure, but is extremely difficult to collect coherent and consistent data across all the sector. And we try to, we came out with a methodology and also to be consistent over time in order to measure the trend, and especially considering this is a sector where the energy policies really matters and really are important to adapt in order to scale up the efficiency.
Okay, I have a last question for both of you, I think, about R&D. I don't know if I understood very well. The ICT companies are investing more. We are forecasting the future. They are investing more. A competition between ICT and the traditional ones, some kind like electrical vehicles or some kind of thing. This is what I understood. Yeah. Could be.
What we see is, I mean, the ICT company by definition invest as the one investing more than everyone else. Maybe pharmaceutical is exception. Thanks God. Thanks God. In R&D. So one thing is the investment in R&D, which is actually the previous slide, not this one. Yeah. But the thing here, what we are seeing is, which is interesting, is a contamination of the energy sector with investment of ICT companies into energy technology startup. What is the reason of this? It's difficult to say. Someone could see this as, sustainability, interesting to manage the system, in a way that encourage even more utilization of devices, application for their sector. Someone else might say that this is a way to expand data access, which is the real value of many of these companies, so the hundreds of millions of personal data that this company has to understand the consumer behavior and to steer the thing. So it's difficult to do. It's difficult. Any company does a strategy. But what we found very interesting is there is a contamination of this sector. I mean, I believe also, and I'm not a main expert of this, I mean, many utilities in Europe and around the world speak about moving from generation, which was the traditional area, to services.
Yeah.
And what there is inside the services is a package of, I believe, different things, including the way to have more efficiency, more better management of portfolio, production profile, grids, and so on, as well as try to understand better the needs of the consumer, which is an area I believe that overlaps partially with the ICT core business.
Okay, it's a gray area. Okay, thank you very much, both of you, Alessandro and Alberto, for coming. One last question of your.
Hi, my name is Salome Valderrama from IF Mercados.
I cannot see you.
Stand up.
My question is, I've noticed that gas has recently been greenwashed as sort of a clean energy, which is a bit strange since it's a fossil fuel. And then you're talking about shale repositioning itself as a bigger part of the sector. So my question is liquid gas positioning itself as a buffer during this transition, and how long is this quote-unquote transition going to last? Are we talking about this solution being a 5-year solution, a 10-year solution, or perhaps an indefinite solution? And it's just going to be part of the sector.
Gas.
And we're going to call it a clean energy in a way. Yes.
Now, the definition of clean, of course, is gray, in the sense everyone can interpret as it wish. We believe that there is a big difference in the environmental impact of the fossil fuels. They are not the same, not at all. And this is just science. How much they emit, how much they pollute, and so on is not an opinion. I mean, just what. So, as far as we see more gas replacing coal, I think is a good news for air pollution and for environmental reason. You can is not something you can see very much in the chart, but in the decline of final investment decision for natural gas we have seen, in reality there is one area that is backing the trend, and is China. Because they want to move out from coal and further to develop nuclear, hydro, solar, wind, they need more gas as a dispatchable source of thing. What we see in any scenario that we are seeing, that we have in the AIE and outside AIE, is that natural gas among the fossil fuel is the one set in any scenario to perform better among fossil fuels. And is going, in any scenario you take, it remains a significant component of fossil fuel in the energy mix, even if declining in 30 years of time. Now, looking at what happens in the market, so not what AIE decide. The last year has been an extremely robust year for natural gas. Demand increased substantially, and has been a record year for liquefied natural gas trade, which increased by 11%, and the main reason is China. of this. What we see is that gas demand is set to remain robust, provided gas is economically competitive, and trade is going to expand substantially over the next few years. I want just to add one thing. But for natural gas, there is also one area which is important in the terms of energy transition, or in shale, as you mentioned before. What we are seeing is a lot of companies that are making much more efforts to reduce their environmental impact of their operation, which is the amount of emissions they generate and the amount of methane emission associated with operation generated, which is a very good thing. But if I can add a personal comment, if they produce more oil and gas, it's because the market is asking for that. So they are addressing a demand. They are not imposing a demand.
Okay, one more question because I missed one of these. Okay, we can finish. We can finish here. Thank you very much, Alessandro and Alberto, for coming here. No, it was one years before. And 2 days after the presentation of the report, we will continue next year with this kind of thing. And now you can download for free this report. Thank you for the International Agency to put this for free. This is a question. Thank you very much. Applause for them.
Thank you. Thank you.